Thank you. Good morning all. It's a pleasure to be here, and I hope that this coming semester we will all be able to learn from the class, particularly how to give a presentation in your particular specialty field. Okay. I'll briefly introduce myself. My name is Garry PILLER. I originally came from Australia, but I have done my doctorate and my postdoctorate here in Japan. So I'm used to both the Japanese system as well as the Australian system. Okay. So today, though, what I'd like to do is to give you a brief introduction about how to present in such a class. Okay. And what I have done is I've divided my class into 4 sections. First, I want to look at the preparation for a presentation. Then I want to look at the structure, the general structure of a scientific presentation, which more often than not takes the form of IMRAD, Introduction, Materials and Methods, Results, Analysis and Discussion. Okay. Then, once I've covered that, I'd like to then go on to how to prepare some slides so that the audience can understand and easily follow what you are saying. And finally, I'd just like to give you a few points on how to deliver, how to speak in front of an audience. Okay. But before I go on to the details, what I'd like to emphasize is that just doing the science and becoming involved in the research is not the end. As this saying says, science not communicated is science not done. Because science is a body of knowledge, and we depend on what our predecessors have done in terms of their work, and then, like this picture down the bottom here, we are sitting on the shoulders of our predecessors and using their knowledge to add to that knowledge. And so this presentation skill is a very important skill for all scientists, and even if you go into business or into government, that skill is still extremely important in today's society. And so this is one of the most famous sayings from a scientist in the UK, Newton. He said, "If I have seen further, it is only by standing on the shoulders of giants." So Newton is maybe one of the most famous scientists, but he acknowledged that he didn't do it by himself. He used all the knowledge that other people had done, and then he added his own insights to it. So that is what you also will need to do. Okay? And one other thing I'd like to emphasize is that communication is a two-way process. If your audience doesn't understand what you are saying, then it is not communication. So what you are trying to do when you are up here is trying to convert data which you are familiar with, which you have read your paper, and then make it so that it becomes information or knowledge for your listener. So you have to not only just tell what the results are, but what context. Why is this important? What did they get from these results? And so your role here is not just they found A, B, and C, but because they found A, this is what it means. You have to give that extra bit of background so that for your listener, it becomes information or knowledge. Okay. And to do that, you need to go beyond reporting. So if you get one paper and read one paper and then present the results of that paper, I would call that reporting. But what we really want is you to read that paper, understand it, and also read some of the background, and then pick out from that what part you would like your audience to understand. And therefore, change it from just reporting A and B to something that the audience can understand. How does this result relate to what other researchers have found? Or what does this result mean in terms of future research needs? So you need to be able to go beyond reporting and provide some discussion or explanation of what the results mean. And that will help then the audience to make sense of the results, and from that what generalizations can be drawn from them. Okay. Fortunately for us as scientists, there is a common format that we can follow. And that format means that we don't have to be artistic. That helps, particularly for people whose English is second language. That helps the people to put into the structure a way that makes it understood by the audience, and that helps the audience to understand what is the next stage in the presentation. Okay. And that is the IMRAD structure. So what I'd like to do now is go on to the brief introduction to IMRAD structure. Okay. So in the IMRAD structure, the image that is often conveyed is when you start a presentation or start a paper even, first of all, you want to create the big context, the big picture. Why is this report information important? Okay, so it sets the context. It highlights what is the problem from the general, so it starts from what the audience would understand and starts to then concentrate in on what particular problem you are presenting. Okay. Next, you want to go on to what is the research that you're reporting about? What focus did they have? What hypothesis? What did they think they could add to the research area? So what are they trying to find? What was done and how is now starting to get much more narrower, focusing only in on what the research is being done. Okay. And then when you go to the results, you're still basically just talking about the results. What did they find? And what does this mean? How does this compare to what other results have been found? Okay. So usually in a paper or a presentation, this is the longest section. And there is, however, a tendency for many beginning presenters to try and present lots of details and put in as many figures and diagrams and data as possible. I would suggest that in that case, you are losing the battle to your own emotions, because what the audience, what the listeners want is for you to think more clearly about what point you want to emphasize in that particular research. And so by necessarily only picking out 1 or 2 points, that is a very big job that you are doing to help the audience understand what your message is for that presentation. So not only is it finding the work and giving as much details as possible, but limiting what you're going to say so that the audience can follow what you are saying much more clearly. Okay. And finally, in the discussion, you want to then come from the details back out to a more broader context. What does this research mean in terms of future research? Or how should this research be interpreted? You want to help the audience to not only just say, we found this, but this is what it means. This is what it means for future research activities. Okay. So, once again, what I'd like to do now is go into a little bit more detail, but rather than present it in the order of introduction, methods, results, and discussion, what I'd like to do is actually present it in the way I think most people go about writing a paper or a presentation. So normally they would start at the results. Why? Because there are very, very often more results than you can fit into 7 minutes. You only have 7 minutes. You cannot fit all the information of one paper into that thing. So at the results stage, at the very start, you need to focus, okay, of all these details, I want to focus on this particular point. That helps you then, once you've decided what you want to focus on, to then, when you've done that, to then write your methods and discussion. Because if you write your methods for all the details, but you only present some of those details, then you've wasted your time writing all those methods, explanations. Okay. So I want to go from results. Normally, once you've chosen your results, you then go to methods. Methods is maybe the easiest section to prepare because it's just straightforward. Okay. Then go on to the discussion. And finally, come back to the introduction. Why? Because here you've narrowed it down, you've discussed it. Now you know what your introduction has to try and achieve. How do you get from the general to this particular method section is what the introduction is about. And so usually that is done towards the end of the preparation, as well as writing the title of the paper. So the title of the paper should also reflect your results selection, not just a broad subject, but help the reader from the very start, or the listener from the very start, to understand this is what I'm going to focus on. Okay. So for results, the purpose is to answer the following questions. What do their results say? What do these results mean in their context? So don't just say they found it was 100 centimetres, but it was 100 centimetres, but other researchers have found that it is 50 centimetres. Or give some context to understand, for the help the listener understand what the results mean in terms of, is it what was expected or unexpected? The results usually has two main parts. One is more a general big picture presentation of the details, and then once you've given that what the overall finding was, then to start to focus in on some core data that you want to help the audience understand the story about the research that you have selected. Okay. In terms of how you use your grammar, there are usually, most of the results section is written in past tense. This is what we found. It was X. When you want to say it is always true or a general statement, then you use the present tense. So you're helping the reader again to understand this is what I did, this is what we found, but this normally when you study this particular subject, this is what is found, is using the present tense to show that that's not your opinion, but it is what the general scientific community understands as a given, as something that most people would accept as reasonable. Okay. So as an example of this, this is in agreement with the observations made by da-di-da-di-da-di-da-di-da. So here, this is helping the audience to understand you are no longer talking about your results, but you're talking in more in general terms. Okay, so in the methods section, I'll just very briefly go over that. What you're trying to do is talk about repeatability. How was it done? So that if some other students or people who are interested, they could then go and find out more about that details. Okay. It is also an important section in terms of credibility. When you're up here and talking, in this class, you have a captured audience. They can't run away. But in the real world, many people are very busy. And they have a choice of whether they want to listen to you or read your work. And so in order for them to have confidence to want to read or listen to your presentation, you have to show that you did the work very thoroughly. You worked with a very deep understanding of the context of the problem, and that what you have to say about it is can be believed, not something that you just did, oh, I think I'll do this today, and go off and do it, and not have any real evidence to support what you did. So this is also a very important part of the methods section. And that, by doing that, it also helps the audience to evaluate, should I believe him or should I believe her? In the discussion section, some of the important points that you want to cover is not repeat what the results section, but only pick out the most important findings. Again, you've done this emphasis of going from the general to I'm only going to do this part of the results section, and then once you've done that, even in the discussion, what you want to do then is finally just pick out, this is the most important take-home message. This is what I want you to remember. And help them by giving explanation or interpretation. This results means this. And what are the implications for the research? Okay, so I'll go past that. And next, I'd like to go finally onto the introduction section. And like this funnel here, the introduction section gives you a wide context to starting. This is what the area of research that is being undertaken. This is the context. This is one of the problems that was identified. Can we address this problem? I think we can do this. And so what you want to show here, the reason we chose this one particular thing is you're telling the audience why you chose this and why it is so important that this subject should be researched. Because if you just said, we got a new instrument today, and so I did an experiment, many people will turn off because there is no real deep thinking about the research process. And so this introduction is trying to help show to the listeners, the researchers, and why they did this. There was a very important reason to do that. Okay, so I'll go past this. And okay. Now I'd like to go on to the slide preparation. And what I'd like to emphasize is that the slides are not your notes. The slides are for the audience, not for you. And so what they should do is help the audience to follow what you are saying. You are the main deliverer of the content of the presentation. The slides are only helping the audience to understand what you are saying. So in order to do that, your slides need to be organized in a logical fashion so that the listener can understand, oh, the next slide is going to be about this. So that you're already helping the audience to follow what the next slide is going to say by the structure or organization of the presentation. And the slides, again, after 7 minutes of talking, usually when the person goes out the door, they can probably remember 1 or 2 main points. If you just talk to them and let the audience decide what is important, each person will have a different idea of what is important. You have to tell the audience, this is what I think is the most important part of my presentation. And you use the slides to do that. So, as I said at the start, it is not a way of saying, these are the results, look at the slide. Everybody just read the slide and I'll just change the slide as it goes. You are the deliverer of the content. The slides are there just to help the audience understand what you are saying. Okay. So in order to do that, there's particularly for a engineering style class where many people have very high skills in computer and software technology, there is a temptation to try and use the latest slide-ins and videos and all sorts of animation in your slides. It doesn't work for the audience. It just distracts them. So try and keep it as simple as possible. And in order to keep it simple, make it big so the audience can read it from the back. Not if you have to have 12 font or 10 font in order to fit all your information on the slide, then you have been not strict enough in cutting out what is not necessary. So, ideally, for most of what you are going to present, it should be about 24 font. And for labels for graphs or tables, 16 font is what would be minimum for an audience to be able to read at the back of the room, from the back of the room. Okay. So this idea of presentation is not a new one. Here in Kyoto, we have many famous temples. One of the most famous temples is of this rock garden of hundreds of years ago. These people, when they were making this rock garden, they chose only certain small points to present in their rock garden, rather than putting lots of trees and other things in there. And they are still getting people to come and visit there and get what they are trying to present. I hope your slides will be like that. Yeah? Okay. So a rule of thumb is for every slide, a slide should only be 1 or 2 minutes per slide. if you have more slides, for instance, if it's 7 minutes, if you have more than 7 to 10 slides, then the computer gets most of your attention as you're trying to race through the slides. So you try and keep the slides so that there is only 1 or 2 per minute. And use a clear font. A font that doesn't have all little squiggles and very artistic. Here, you're not going to be judged on how artistic you are, but how clearly your audience can understand what you're saying. It's examples, okay? And again, on your slide, some points you want to make more clear than other points. You can use bigger font, or you can use color to show, even on this slide, this is what I think is the most important. So you're giving the audience information to interpret what you are saying and help them understand that. Okay. And again, in order for it to be easily read, it needs to have a strong contrast. So a light background and dark letters, or a dark background and light letters. Often, though, many people, they see all these thousands of colours they can choose from, and they get caught up in the technology. Try and keep in mind that it's the reader you're making it for, not for you. And pictures or diagrams, they can tell you things that would take many, many more words. So in English, we have a saying, a picture is worth 1,000 words. So if at all possible, use those pictures or diagrams. Here in Japan, each year, they choose one kanji, one Chinese character, to represent what are the aspirations, the hopes of people in Japan. And again, they announced the presentation here in Kyoto at Kiyomizu. Okay, so this is not new, all this presentation stuff. It's been used from ancient times. And the final thing is, if you start with one particular font, one particular color, keep it consistent throughout the slide. Don't change as you go through the slide presentation. Finally, I'd like to talk about delivery. Okay. When you're up here and talking, your words and the slides are important, but also your personal presentation. Are you trying to speak to all the audience? Are you making it certain that all the audience can hear what you are saying? And, are you using your voice also to show this is important and other things are not so important? So you're also helping the audience to understand where the importance is by using your voice. Okay. In order to do that, you need to be able to talk to the audience. Try and get their attention. Get eye contact. That is a way in which the audience feels a desire to also want to participate in the presentation. But if you don't do that, then you're likely to get many nodding heads, sleepy heads, as they go off to sleep. Okay? And another very important thing is to be enthusiastic. If you are not interested in your talk, who is going to be interested? Yeah? This is the Chinese character for fun, happy. But even if you can't read the Chinese character, the style is giving you a feeling for what it is trying to represent. Okay. And finally, a few tips for delivery. Normally, students, when they first come up here, it is a nervous time. Their heart is thumping. Their mind is white. There is little opportunity to start to think clearly. So a good way to get over that is to memorize maybe just the first sentence or first two sentences, just to help you to get started. And then you can start to relax. Okay. Another common thing is the swirling of the laser pointer. If you're going to use the laser pointer, make sure it's trying to actually help you give the presentation of what you are trying to point out. Okay. And emphasize and repeat key ideas. Okay. And finally, as Kondo-sensei said in the introduction, it's practice, practice, practice. That is what it is. It is a skill that is learnt. It is not genetic. I don't have the presentation genes. It is something that everybody can learn and become to master, but it requires practice. And a very important part is practice out aloud. Okay. Okay. I have given some things. What I'd like to do now is, when you are preparing your slides, if you send me your slides the week before the presentation, so we are presenting on Mondays, if you send it to me by at least Thursday or Friday of the week before, I will provide some comments and email you back some comments about your slides or suggest this could be improved this way. That's my email address. Okay. And to give you a very quick example of what I mean by a presentation, I prepared a presentation on sheep shearing. So I come from Australia, and sheep shearing is also a very long tradition in Australia, but maybe not so common here in Asia. Okay. So rather than go through all the details, what I'd like to point out is my title, Can Sheep Shearing Be Automated? What I've done is I've already suggested to the audience, I'm talking about how can sheep shearing be automated. So I'm already telling the audience what to expect from this presentation. And I've used pictures here to show you what sheep shearing is about and what are the problems. So I've given you this introduction of what sheep shearing is, what are the problems, and so I'm now trying to hone you in on why automation is important. Then I go through and look at what are the details required for sheep shearing robot. This is what they came up with. This is the robot they invented. These are the results that they got from that sheep shearing magic. And the conclusion is da-di-da-di-da-di-da. If what I was trying to show with this slides is that I didn't need to put a lot of detail in, but just use those slides to help the audience understand what I will say in that presentation. Okay. Thank you. Are there any questions?
Okay, maybe it's a bit unrelated, but what do you think about TED talks? I mean, like in the TED talks, they always prepare a presentation. Do you think it's a kind of presentation that it can be considered as scientific, or is just something like that?
Sorry, I'm not familiar.
TED.
EE?
T. Have you know about TED talks?
TED Talks.
Yes.
Yes.
What do you think about their presentation?
Okay. I also present a course in scientific communication, and I often use TED presentations in that course because these presentations are often quite short, only 10 or 15 minutes, but on a very specific title, and they are broadcast to the world. So they are chosen, they are among all the scientists, some of the best presenters. They are not only scientists, but they are communicators. And what I'm looking at, what they do, is I think a very good example to learn about how to become a scientific communicator.
Thank you for a nice presentation. I would like to know what are the rules to put reference in PowerPoint presentation, and you can compare with our scientific paper. Thank you.
The rules of referencing change between what type of journals and what your particular lab is doing. So one of the first things that you must do if you are preparing a presentation for a particular journal or a paper for a particular journal is to find out what that journal specifies in terms of both how it sets out the paper and what headings and subtitles it has and what referencing system it has. So it would be a very big shame if you put a lot of work in, had a very good presentation or a good paper, and then when you submitted it, it didn't follow the instructions of the journal, and it was rejected at that stage because of the instruction, that didn't follow the instructions. So, yes, follow what the rules of the journal are, and make sure that when you start to write that up, that you understand this is the format that I need to follow.
Thank you for the nice presentation. I've got a question, especially on the 5-minute discussion. Would you please kindly tell us how to answer a question, because you may be asked a question and you might not have the answer, so it's good to know how do you respond to a question, and maybe if you have the answer, how do you also portray the answer in a manner that the audience who has asked the question will be able to understand. Thank you.
At the time of discussion, if a question comes that you don't understand, then it's also important for your credibility to acknowledge that I don't understand or I am not familiar with this particular thing, but also indicate that you make efforts to find out what the answer is and communicate that back to that person at a later stage. So there is often, not here in this class where you're presenting the results of other people, but when you are presenting your own research results and starting to put the things together, there's sometimes a tendency to sometimes, if the results don't quite agree with what your hypothesis is, to not include them. I would argue that in the reverse, that if you highlighted, we thought we should get this results. The reasons why, from the literature, this suggests we should get this result. But we found they weren't that. We found this. So you actually, by acknowledging that, showing one, that you have very high knowledge about what the previous research is about, and that this is what, from previous research, you would expect. And so you maybe have found a weakness in the current research that needs to be further researched and explained and create a new paradigm for that results. So that acknowledgement is enriching your own credibility, I believe, rather than making your results less relevant. And second point, in terms of general reply to the audience, first of all, listen carefully to what the question is, and try to reply in a way that emphasizes your understanding of where those results, what that results indicate. Because while you're up here, you are trying to help the audience to understand how you're thinking about this particular area is currently going. And all science, very little of science is fact. It's only taken to be acknowledged until new data comes that disproves that. So we don't have 100% certainty for most things, and that also needs to be reflected in your language as you talk to the audience. Are there any questions from Taiwan?
Yes, please.
Thank you, Professor Pillow, for your wonderful speech. And I got a question about the picture and the words. As you mentioned, the picture is better than the words. And what is the factor ratio or the perfect picture number in one speech? Like a 10 slide, how many pictures should you use is the better way? And the ratio between the picture and the words. Thank you very much.
In order to answer that, I think there isn't really a rule. Rather, as I indicated in one of the early slides, you're trying to take the data and results from the research and create an understanding in the audience that makes that information, not just data. And by trying to do that, if a picture can help that thing, then there can be many, many pictures in your presentation. But make sure that the picture on each slide is big enough that you can understand any text on that picture. Rather than having lots of pictures on the one slide, that means that you have to shrink, make each picture very small, and makes it very difficult for your audience to understand. So in the end, my reply would be that base your decision on what you think would make it the most easiest for your audience to understand what you're trying to make, the point you're trying to make. And also try and limit the number of points that you're trying to make so that you can get that message across.
Any more questions from the TV side? Any questions? Okay.
Sorry, one more interesting question. How do you suggest the background on the slide? The black one is better or the white one is better? Thank you.
Okay. So So I would suggest that a strong contrast is good. Traditionally, science, there has been the white background or black lettering, or a dark blue with white or very light yellow colouring. But there is many variations on that can be used. But in the end, what it means is there a strong contrast? Can it be easily read? The criteria for selection shouldn't be, is it pretty? Is it beautiful? But how easily can the audience read that and get the information from that slide?
Somehow you want to have some questions? Somehow.
Hello, professors. Thank you for your presentation. And I have a question to ask. It's about when we give our presentation, especially in the method used in the paper. We all want to make it as simple as possible when we present to the audience. But the method itself can be very complicated and based on the difficult knowledge. So how can we control it to make it very simple, but at the same time to present it precisely when we convey the point? Thank you.
As I mentioned earlier when looking at the start of the results, it's also very important when you are picking out the results to think about how much information can you get in 7 minutes. And normally in a presentation, the introduction would be maybe 10–15% of the time, the methods another 20%, with a large percentage going to the results and then the discussion. If, when you're choosing a paper and they are using lots of method materials that are quite complex, it becomes even more important to only focus on one or two of those particular methods. And particularly for engineering subjects that maybe have a lot of formulas, at this stage for this particular audience, I would suggest that the formulas themselves are of lesser importance, but have a reference for where the paper is, and so that if anybody who is interested in the more details, they can use that reference to go and look up those details about the methods. Does that answer your question?
Oh, yes, thank you.
Any more questions? Oh, this comes.
Hi, Professor. Thank you for your presentation. I have a question. The presentation must be seriously, or we can make presentation funny.
Oh, I think you best consult Professor Chen and Kondo Sensei about that.
Yeah, some unique presentation is we can keep in our mind. So it would be good sometimes. But someone also we can keep something we can remember well. But depends on the some situation, something topic. Maybe some of fun maybe included in your presentation, but not always. Depends.
Oh, I have one comment. I also attend Professor Kondo's laboratories presentations, And one of the most memorable presentations I saw there was of a person who was studying Helmholtz resonance. So it's a resonance in a narrow body of a square. And he got out a Coke bottle and he went across to the tap and filled up the water and blew into the bottle and created a resonance, or Helmholtz resonance. You can hear the sound there. That for me helped me so much to understand what Helmholtz resonance was all about. It was also fun and interesting. It got my attention. And I still remember that, already maybe 2 years since he gave it. But after he'd done that, then he went to his slides and he presented his research. So it was a very good combination of interest or entertainment, but was for a particular purpose of demonstrating what that particular scientific principle was about.